The iDsonix is a company that is known for offering accessories related to storage devices such as USB hubs, M.2 SSD enclosures, and so on. However, they have decided to enter the M.2 SSD market and their first SSD is here for me to review. However, given the plethora of new M.2 SSDs on the market right now, can this one stand out? Well, we shall see, because iDsonix is a company owned after all by Orico, which has a legacy of doing good products in terms of storage. The iDsonix i7000 Pro is the new SSD of the company. It is available in several storage capacities: 512GB, 1TB, 2TB, and 4TB. The model we have in this review is the 1TB variant and has a price tag of $95 at least at the time of this review. This is a PCIe Gen 4x4 NVMe 2.0 SSD that offers advertised reading speeds of up to 7000 MB per second and writing speeds of up to 6500 MB per second. In addition to that, we have a dedicated heatsink included and thermal pads as well to aid with the cooling of the SSD and its internal components. The design of this SSD is simple. It's an SSD after all, and that's it. The i7000 Pro, at least the 1TB variant, has a single-sided PCB and uses a label on both sides. The front label is mainly for looks and a bit of cooling. I mean, it has a layer of metal underneath, but it's nothing fancy like copper or graphene. The back label is used for the serial number and technical specifications, and that's about it. In terms of the internal components of this SSD, well, things are getting interesting to say the least, as this SSD is using the brand new Maxio MAP1602A controller. This controller is manufactured on 12nm nodes and uses multiple ARM Cortex R5 CPU cores. The memory chips used on this SSD are made by Yangtze Memory, or YMTC. These are a 232-layer 3D TLC NAND memory chips with the model number M7117501-TB38814. And that's about it for the internal components of the SSD. Everything is new and has been already proven to be reliable and have a good performance with other SSDs as well. The testing system used in this review is based around the Intel Z790 platform with an i7 13700K CPU, 64GB of DDR5 RAM, and an RTX 3090 Super graphics card. The first test is a simple file copy test inside the SSD. This way we can simulate a daily work task on the SSD itself and having no external sources of corruption in terms of results. And we will do this with two file sizes. First, we duplicate a 50GB folder, and here we can see that the speeds starts off well enough at over 7GB per second for the file transfer. However, the speed drops mid-transfer to around 5GB per second and then slowly lowers towards the end of the file transfer to around 2GB per second. An impressive performance though from an SSD that does not have a DRAM chip to help with its speed. Next, we will do the same test but with a folder that has 100GB worth of files inside, and here the SSD behaves differently, as it was expected. The file transfer starts with a speed of 5GB per second and then drops to around 2GB per second and stays there on average. The impressive thing here is that the speed remains constant at 2GB per second until the file transfer is complete, and that is impressive because many SSDs cannot do this, and usually once the cache is filled, the speed drops at under 1GB per second until the cache is emptied again. And here we get a better idea of just how good this SSD truly is, as it sits between the Silicon Power P34A80 and the Sabrent Rocket Q4. However, when we look at the 100GB file copy test, this SSD is on the top position of the chart. The next test though is a synthetic benchmark, and it's the well-known Crystal Disk Mark, now at version 8. This is the best benchmark out there to test everything storage related: SD cards, SSDs, USB flash drives, hard drives, you name it. It's easy to use, free, and more importantly, it's reliable. And in this reading test, the SSD is on the first position, being ahead of the Team Group T-Force Cardea A440, well, just barely, but still ahead. And when we look at the writing speeds, things are pretty much the same, only that the gap between the first and second place is larger. The next test is Atto Disk Benchmark, another popular benchmark that is widely used for SSD testing. The difference here is that this benchmark uses a lot more samples of storage sizes and thus has a better result overall. And here the SSD is on the second position in the reading test, behind the Silicon Power XS70. And in terms of the write testing, the SSD loses more ground and is on the third position behind the Silicon Power XS70 and the Team Group Cardea Z440L. Finally, we have a video game loading test, and we are using Shadow of the Tomb Raider. While it is an older game, it is still good to showcase the performance of an SSD as its level loading times are reliable. And here the iDsonix i7000 Pro needed a respectable 18.2 seconds to load the game level, and this places it in the middle of the graph. In terms of the temperature, we have good news. This SSD, even under heavy load, kept cool and reached a maximum temperature of 60 degrees Celsius, while with the heatsink applied, the temperature dropped from 60 to 58 degrees, which sort of shows that the included heatsink, while working, it does not do much in terms of heat dissipation. When we look at the performance of the SSD, it's easy to see why it's a great choice for both gaming and workstation alike. This SSD performs as good as the big name brands for less money in many cases, and it maintains itself cool even under heavy loads and benchmarking, which is impressive for such a new controller and NAND memory chips. Even without a DRAM cache chip, the speed remains stable even after long periods of usage, although the cache on the drive has its limits, and of course the speed will drop once that is filled up completely. All this being said, this is a good SSD, great actually, if you can find it under $100 US. If you like this review, then you might consider subscribing for more, and if you want to support me in a direct way, then in the description below you will find the links for both the Patreon and the Subscriber Star pages of this channel.